Half a day and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I know we're a little bit excited about today. We're about to start. Thank you. The Committee on Education, Air Transportation, and Statistics, Research and Planning will now convene this confirmation hearing. Today is March 8, 2019, and it is currently 2:04 in the afternoon. For the record and in accordance with open government law, public notices were sent out via email to all senators, stakeholders, and all main media broadcasting outlets on February 27, 2019, and the second notice on March 5, 2019. Notice of today's confirmational hearing was also available on the Guam Legislature's website. With me today is Senator Telo Taitugui and Senator Kelly Marsh. Thank you for being here. On today's agenda, we have the appointment of Mr. Tyrone Taitano to serve as the Director of Bureau of Statistics and Plans, and Mr. Donald Weekly Sr. to serve as a member of AB Wampat International Airport Authority Board, as well as Mr. Daniel Tidinko, as serving also as a member as AB Wampat International Authority Board of Directors. Okay, I would like to start with our appointment of Mr. Tyrone Taitano as the Director of Bureau of Statistics and Plans. And today we have Mr. Taitano and Mr. Weekly for testimony. If you could please come forward to the table. Okay, sure. And please, we'll start with Mr. Weekly. And I think Mr. Didinko wants to give a testimony, and then we'll end with you, Mr. Taitano. Thank you. Please just go ahead and state your name for the record, and then you may give your testimony.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Senators. My name is Don Weekly. I've been a resident of Guam for a little over 60 years. I am here to testify in my confirmation hearing for the airport. If you have any questions or anything about the airport, I'm prepared to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Weekly. We are now on Mr. Tyrone Taitano's testimony for Bureau of Statistics and Plans. Perhaps there was are you giving testimony for Mr. Taitano?
No.
Okay, so I have you in the roster here, so perhaps there was a little mix-up. Okay.
Well, I do endorse him, yes.
Okay, okay, very good. Thank you for that. Mr. Tidinko, please.
Off a day, Madam Vice Speaker, Senator Marsh Taitano, Senator Taitagui, Senator Moylan. My name is Daniel Tidinko. I'm here to testify in support of the nomination of Tyrone Taitano to serve as the Director of the Bureau of Plans, Statistics, and Research. I was heartened when Governor Leon Guerrero and Lieutenant Governor Tenorio decided to tap somebody like Tyrone for that particular position, because during the transition, which I was serving on, she asked me to oversee one of the components was the Bureau of Statistics and Planning. And we went down there, and Tyrone is no stranger to that particular operation. He served there in the previous capacity, and I think he's going to do well. The immediate task at hand for him, of course, is the census, the 2020 census, which is taking place. Alongside of that, just on a personal note, I've known Tyrone for probably about 35 years in a professional capacity and a familial capacity. We worked together in this very hall in another lifetime. When he worked for Speaker San Agustin, and I worked for Senator Pilar Lujan. And he certainly has all the requisite skills to be able to take that department into to the place where it needs to be. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At the outset, I just have a brief oral statement. I want to publicly express my appreciation to Governor Leon Guerrero for the honor and trust that she has put in me in nominating as Director of the Bureau of Statistics and Plans. It is my privilege to be part of a team of professionals at the Bureau in dealing with issues that are of great concern to the community and in serving the public interest. And that has actually been a great privilege of these last couple months. And my thanks to you, Madam Chair, and the members of the committee for holding this confirmation hearing. and I stand ready to answer any and all questions you may have about my views about the position and the path forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Titano. I'd further like to acknowledge Senator Muña and Senator Moylan. Thank you for being here. I just have a couple of questions. Perhaps I'll leave it open to my colleagues if they have any questions to you. Senator Titano.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for stepping up to the plate, Tyrone. I've admired you from afar for a long time, especially in the legislature when you were working with Senator Respicio, and some of your opinions that came out of there held true to form. And I like to thank you for going to BSP. Before I left GITA, I was working with BSP on a one Guam map approach. And this was a map that was to identify the properties that the government of Guam owns and what properties the federal government owns, and what property is owned privately. And I've been working with Jesse and Erwin up at BSP for quite some time, and it was a surprise to me that there was not a map to actually show how much property is really under the government of Guam versus the federal. And in fact, in the report submitted by the federal government showing how much property they did not drive with what we had to as well. So I hope you continue to work toward this goal to get a one map Guam approach that every agency can look at and review via electronically or printed out, especially with land management as well, because I couldn't even find anything there at land management. They didn't know the answer.
Yeah.
So it's very unfortunate, and I think BSP is the right department to start reviewing these properties and boundaries and how much it is so.
Well, thank you for that comment, Senator. I would have to say regarding the one map Guam idea, this is one of the things they're examining and bringing up to speed the land use planning portion of the Guam Coastal Management Program, which is under the Bureau. They have responsibility for the northern, central, and southern land use plans here, many of which are substantially out of date. Regarding the specific issue of federal and Gov Guam properties here, some of that, if not all of it, is going to be addressed in the compatibility use contracts with Matrix that the Guam Military Build-Up Office has commissioned using OEA funding. That contract was signed in late last year, so it's in early stages. But I am in communication with them to see whether they called it the one map thing, but something along those lines is, I believe, will substantially address your concerns about a consolidated land use picture.
Okay, thank you so much.
But I will keep you apprised of the matter as it proceeds.
I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator.
And thank you so much for, again, stepping up to the plate.
Very
on this.
kind, Senator. Thank you.
Thank you.
Buenas and half a day. So I just want to use this time to put out a couple of comments. One is that when it comes time to the nomination vote, I will be recusing myself. Mr. Titano here is the Titano within the parentheses of my name. So, but I would like to also just say he's one of the most intelligent people that I know, and so I know that he will be doing great work at the Bureau. And it really, I think, says a lot when some of the staff for the Bureau have come up to me of their own volition and have said that they recognize his capability and his commitment, and they really appreciate it. So I just wanted to mention that. Sijos Masi.
Thank you, Senator Marsh. Senator Shelton, do you have any questions for Mr. Titano? Okay. Mr. Titano, just a couple quick questions. I noticed in your packet there was a 13-year gap of employment. I'm thinking that between previous jobs, so I'm thinking that maybe that was an oversight. But can you just talk a little bit about...
Yes, I'm sorry if the employment history was unclear, but just very briefly here, okay. I started working for the government of Guam in 1977 for a freshman minority senator named Joe T. San Augustine, and I was only going to do it for 6 months, but it was proved to be such an interesting job, I stayed with him for 18 years. And when I left his service, he was Speaker of the Guam Legislature. I then went into the Gutierrez Bedawi administration, where I began first as General Manager of the Guam Mass Transit Authority for about 11 months. Then I was brought up to ALU as Director of Policy Development Operations for a couple years. And then I was sent to GMH to serve as Hospital Administrator for a couple years. And then I returned to the Governor's office, and I retired from public service to go work for the Gore Lieberman campaign in Florida in 2000. So after that, I came back and attended some private interests, and then after the election of Senator Roy Respicio in 2002, I went to work for him for several years. I worked for 2 years for Senator Mike Cruz, and then returned to Senator Respicio's office after that. And for the last couple of years, I've dealt with personal family business interests until I was asked to serve in the current administration, which I had not expected. I thought I might have been at best appointed to a governing board someplace. So, but I'm pleased, very pleased with this opportunity, and I will certainly collect the record if that's that's left in there.
Thank you. And then can you please share a little bit about the vision that you have for BSP, some of the projects that you're working on, perhaps some of the ones we discussed when we met?
Well, you know, the Bureau of Statistics and Plans has a number of statutory missions here, but they're kind of general missions. And given the evolution of how government planning has gone over the last several decades, it's ended up with sort of a hodgepodge of responsibilities. Some of them range from data collection for the CPI and imports here to dealing with issues of coral reef, dealing with a coastal zone, which involves us a very important role in federal consistency review, particularly for military projects. It also, in this cycle here, the Bureau is the lead agency for the census, and that's a major task before us over the next couple years. Beyond that, though, I've been tasked in the administration to take a look at certain processes within the government as a whole, including social and economic planning here. There are of course, plans. There are several agencies that do plans, but one of the goals of the administration is to move towards comprehensive, database, socioeconomic planning. And so in that respect, I've examined some of the data inputs and looking for a way to move to a process till you have that comprehensive socioeconomic plan. It doesn't necessarily have to be like one plan. It could be half a dozen plans, but at least at the baseline here, you have something that's sustainable and that's data-based. To that end, the Bureau has submitted an application to the Department of Interior and the Technical Assistance Program for an economic action plan that would, one, examine the data inputs, what's being collected, what's not being collected, what other sources do, and do a step-by-step basis to reach towards, to look at the planning process, to integrate them, and to reach towards that as well. I've also been taking a look at, working with my colleagues of the Office of Technology, to take a look at the back-end computer systems for particularly the line agencies. There is a varying degrees of computer capability throughout the government of Guam, but in general, although a lot of the hardware is good here, a lot of the actual automated processing computer systems are kind of locked in the last century here, and we're not really taking advantage of the advances in computer technology for things like predictive analytics. That's where you take large-scale data and use it not to analyze what was happened in the past, but use it to identify trend lines in the future. As an example, it's possible nowadays to take data from, for example, in healthcare programs like Medicaid or MIP, and based on that data, crunch and identify future trends. So, like if you anticipate a higher rate of dealing with hypertension or diabetes here, that gives you the opportunity to either do intervention programs to curb up that trend. There are advances in using new artificial and technology things for like remote patient monitoring, whereby, you know, one of the problems is for people who are homebound is the ability to get to their doctor on a regular visit. Well, by remote patient monitoring here, these things can be monitored generally, and then he can sift it through the vital information and go to a healthcare provider, and therefore provide that service, and therefore not only produce better patient outcomes, but also lower costs as well. So all this is happening around us here, and we're not really quite taking advantage of. Obviously, this is sort of a long-term view, but I think the Bureau of Planning is a place to start to take the long-term view.
Thank you, Mr. Titano. Do my colleagues have any questions for Mr. Titano? Yes, Senator Shelton. I'd also like to thank Senator Torres and Senator Shelton for being here today. Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Titsnow.
Hello, Senator Shelton.
Half a day. Thank you very much for accepting the appointment. I have one question for you. I know that BSP prepares the report on the impact of the compacts of free association, and the federal government has always contended that our accounting of these costs are incorrect. So I'd like to ask you, what will you do to prepare the report that provides the data necessary to make our case to the federal government?
Well, in the administration, in its response to the provisions that call for a compact report, have raised these issues with the federal government. It has been acknowledged that so far past reports do not conform with standards, particularly those set by the most recent GAO report that had to allow for certain things here. But there's some data we can do here. For example, we've been able to calculate education costs that conform to the GAO guidelines and through the Department of Education. To moving forward, though, so for the next report due February 1st next year, we have submitted again a technical assistance program grant with the Department of Interior that will do a number of things in order to deal with the issue of identifying expenses on the basis of citizenship rather than ethnicity here. The other reason they raise is, in the GA report, is to allowing for the economic impact or the economic benefit, particularly tax revenues, from the COFA migrants in addition to their expenses here. And so if the grant is approved here, one of the approaches to do is probably do a sort of statistical abstract, maybe going to multiple tax years and get a statistical sampling. And from that, we can identify how many of the taxpayers and what level they were at in terms of tax contributions for those years. And that would be a basis of dealing with that rather thorny issue. It also will allow for alternative means to meet the other things stipulated in the GA report. So it's my goal is to develop a report for the governor's consideration to submit to the Department of Interior that will conform to the GAA guidelines by next year's report.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Mr. Titsnow, thank you for accepting the position. I'm
very kind, sir.
I kind of feel like you're ready to go to work, and I'm just using your time, and I want to see you behind that desk because I'm looking forward to all these reports that you're going to come on out. It's really going to help me with my decisions and introducing different bills. So I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to working well with you. Thank you so much.
As am I, Senator. Thank you very much. Very kind of you.
Half a day. So I just want to make another comment and note that I'm using restraint, although Mr. Titsnow opened with, he is open to any and all questions. But regarding the information that's being compiled regarding the COFA compact impact costs, I just want to point out, and perhaps you want to speak to it, that the entities that are involved in this have been calling for DOI to set up the methodology and the guidelines for many, many years now, and they have as yet, as far as I understand, they have yet to provide those guidelines, which leaves everybody, I think, unable to meet their expectations if they won't tell us exactly what their expectations are. But if you could speak to that a little bit, if you find the need to.
It is true the Department of Interior has not exactly established the exact guidelines you have to meet. However, they have in their comments on past reports submitted on compact impact by the territories here referred to the 2015 GAO report. So whether they, even if you, though there's a very real possibility that even if we meet the GOA guidelines, the Interior has the leeway to come up with further reasons not to give Guam and the other territories its full compensation. This whole issue of dealing with compact impact over the last several decades is, as I'm sure the members of this body and the community has been a very frustrating subject here. And it even on the best of circumstances, it will be heavy sledding to actually get some real improvement on it, in my personal view. But the starting point is to work the process. So since they're citing the GAO report, we're going to work to meet the GAO report standards here and at least deal with the excuses for not compensating Guam and the other territories for the full compact impact cost. That's our goal, at least.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Titano. I look forward to your confirmation.
And if I may, Madam Chair, for the record, I'm in support of the nominees for the Airport Authority to my left.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr.
Okay.
Titano. Okay, that exhausts our testimony for Mr. Titano. I will now call on Donald Weekly Sr. And we have listed to give testimony is, it's written testimony. Is there anyone else that would like to give oral testimony for Mr. Weekly? Okay, Mr. Dan Tydinko, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Like Mr. Titano, I've known Mr. Weekly for the better part of probably 3, maybe close to 4 decades. We're close family friends. His son Michael and I worked together in this legislative hall as well back in the mid-'80s. And his wife, his late wife, worked alongside my mother for a very, very long time, and they're very close friends over at the Guam Waterworks Authority. Mr. Weekly certainly has the character and the temperament to be able to serve the board of directors over at the A.B. Wampat International Terminal well, or airport well. So I fully endorse him. Thank you.
And Mr. Weekly?
We don't have these kind of things down in Iran, so bear with me, okay? Just a brief written, I'm unable to provide details about all the aspects of the airport, obviously, but I have a good working knowledge of what's going on without going in the weeds, but I'm assuming I'll get in the weeds after I'm up there a few months, you know. But some of my concerns, not concerns, but things that I would look at when I get up there would be, and these are not in priority, by the way, is the concession agreement and how important that is to the operations of the airport. And I know it's in, going through litigation and stuff right now, but without that concession agreement, the airport basically would have been in the red last year. They would have lost money, As it is, they netted like $7 million. But that $15 million they're getting every year is, it's important. It's important to this new third floor they're making there, that they're building. And it's important to just about everything they're doing up there. I mean, they just went, they got all these CIPs lined up. And some of them, it's going to be difficult to do because now all their efforts are on that third floor arrival area, so, but, we are going, but that's one thing I wanted to look at when I get up there, but how important it is that we retain a concession all the time, that we have to, I mean, it's roughly almost 20% of their total revenues, the airport, so. Next would be just the overall reception of tourists and our local people also. And I've always been a strong thinker about first impressions. When you get off an airplane in an airport somewhere, let's say you're on a 5-day vacation or something, that you get down, the bathrooms are dirty and the customs people are mad or grouchy, or the immigration people, you get a bad impression. That's your first impression before you even start your vacation, and you carry that through with you all the way. And I notice I've arrived there at 4 o'clock in the morning, the bathrooms are not up to par, in the baggage area, and baggage is slow coming out and things like that. All those things that I'll work with the board on improving, I hope. And again, the economy of our island is so dependent on that airport. Virtually 100% of our tourists come through there. And that's the major economy of the island. That's the driving economy of the island. So that's something that we always got to bear in mind, And things. CIP projects, I'm not too up on them. I know there's some pending for the parking area. I think it's going to be a parking building. And of course, the arrival area, which is a little bit running over, that's funded by FAA and bond money. But I think that Senator Atta said it might go over by end up being around 120 million, you know. That's a lot of that's the fault of not having as-built drawings. In other words, the contractor didn't know what was in there when it was originally built. And I understand that those drawings were lost in a storm or something. So they wouldn't know until after they bid and started construction and started looking in there and finding all these things that they didn't plan on when they bid on the project. You see what I mean? So in that case, you'd have to expect an overrun. And then the other thing is, I should mention this, concerning the concession, you know, they've negotiated, the airport's negotiated a agreement with the concession, the vendor, to reduce the cost per month. I mean, the money that they're paying per month is $2.5 million. But they reduced that by $175,000 to make up for the inconvenience of caused by the construction, because the concession had to shut down some of their stuff and blah blah blah, you know. But that has more impact on revenues, right? You know, so. The airport financial status, I think I've talked about that. You know, they run about 80 million a year in revenue, and about 45 million O&M, and then about 7 million they had profit last year, so something like that. And airport staffing, of course, my concern, no matter where I work, is always about staffing, the staff, the people, their security, how they do and things like that, because they are the engine that runs the airport. So I notice we have roughly 34 LTAs at the airport, 245 employees, 34 LTAs. A lot of them are security, and to look at them, you'd think they were airport police, but really they're not. They can't carry firearms or anything like that. I have discussed this a little bit with Senator Atta, and what these people need, the security people need, is more training so they can qualify for a regular police officer, carry weapons and stuff like that. But I don't think they got 40-some vacancies up there, and a lot of them are police officers, you know. So that's something else we'll look into. I don't have anything else, but if you got questions,
Thank you, Mr. Weekly. And also to caveat to that, a lot of the security personnel are being tasked to, for the flow-through for the international passengers that come in, which is, of course, as a result of the lack of the third floor corridor.
Yeah.
As you've mentioned, that has been over-budgeted and it's increasing in cost.
Yeah.
I'd like to open it now to my colleagues. So Senator Peter Talahi, thank you for joining us today, and Senator Lee, thank you as well. Do any of my colleagues have any questions? Just go ahead and pull the mic and introduce yourself and ask the question.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Hafa-Day, Mr. Weekly.
Hi, Senator.
Thank you very much for accepting the appointment. I was glad to hear in your testimony you spoke about overall cleanliness of the airport, and I was concerned to see in an exit survey from GVB that only 23% of Korean tourists that visit our island strongly agree that the airport is clean. So if you can expand a little bit more on your plan to improve the perception of the cleanliness of our airport for our visitors.
Well, we just, you know, of course that's a management thing, right? You know, as far as cleaning bathrooms and cleaning stuff like that. But as a board member, we would encourage that, you know, let's start shaping up and start cleaning. Of course, some of it's structural, you know. Some, no matter how much you clean them, they still don't look good. But, you know, I mean, they just finished the bathrooms in the baggage area, right? Less than a year ago. But you still go in there and there's no, you know, it's not being kept clean. You know, and that's a new bathroom, you know, things like that. I mean, I worked at public health and I was administrator of the Southern Area Health Center, and I mean, it shined all the time, you know. It's just you gotta empower the housekeeping people and you know, encourage them and support them, you know, pride, you know. We don't want people coming to Guam and just going back with a bad impression, there's dirty, there's trash along the road, tourists, things like that, you know. Now when they can go to other locations and find a much better cleanliness and stuff. But, you know, that's something I will always have in my mind as a board member and do something about it. Okay?
Senator Torres?
Hafaday, Mr. Weekly. I see from your resume that you've had experience with the government, with the Department of Planning, the Bureau of Planning, and the Guam Memorial Hospital and Public Health. But most recently, you've had a lot of experience with a construction consultant, which at this phase in the airport's efforts with the third floor corridor divider between inbound and outbound passengers, I can see that your knowledge of construction management would be an asset to the general manager. I also know you to be a very upstanding person, and I certainly would support your nomination.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Half a day, Mr. Weekly.
Senator?
My same sentiments as my colleague who just spoke to as well about your diverseness between the being in the hospital and in healthcare and then all the way into construction. And I really just wanted to commend you and thank you for stepping up to be a board member for the Guam Airport Authority. I just, in my recent travels, was in that corridor there trying to board a plane, and I saw all the tourists, they're just sitting on the floor waiting to board a flight, and it was kind of disheartening. So I'm sure with your expertise and the board's support towards the Airport Authority management, we can get that done as soon as possible. So thank you very much for your...
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Half a day, Mr. Weekly.
Hi, Senator.
Sijus Masi for accepting the nomination, and I also want to lend myself to similar statements as those that have preceded me. I know you to be a person of upstanding character and somebody who really cares about the community and improving it. So I was very pleased to hear some of the issues that have been going through your mind and that you would like to make sure to bring up as a board member, from just the different aspects to what our airport is and what it needs, how people interact with it, the impact that it provides and the ways that it fits into our economy, to management issues, and making sure that we're working towards improvements and improving the overall experience. So I just want to mention those things and give a general statement of support.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, for the opportunity to speak. Hi, Uncle Don.
Hi.
My father and Uncle Don are first cousins, so Auntie Sylvia is my father's first cousins, and
Right.
I've known you all my life, you know, and the family, and my cousin Michael over there, sitting there, and greatly appreciate. You have a wealth of knowledge and experience to give to the Guam Airport Authority, and I appreciate you stepping up to the plate.
Thank you.
There is a bill that I have introduced. It's bill number 8. It's regarding commercial leases. And I'm hoping that you'll look at that bill. It lifts the limit of 5 years to 10 years to lease property. And I know that this is something that most agencies are looking forward to. It allows to bring in more revenue and actually investment into the properties that they hold under their department to generate revenue. So I'm asking you to look at that bill and make sure you're here at the public hearing for that bill as well.
I will. I will.
And secondly, you know, Uncle Don, I was at the Guam Visitors Bureau for a couple years, and one of the things I noticed is that, you know, the Guam Airport Authority needs help with funding, you know, and They also work well with GVB, but I really think that GVB can stand to support with some funding to the Guam Airport Authority. Without planes bringing our tourism in, we won't have any tourists. And it begins with the flights, bringing in. And if there's anything you want to lobby for over there, I suggest you lobby GVB, for some funding for you as well. Okay?
Yeah, we'll look into that. We understand, or I understand, I'm sure the board does, how important it is to interface with GVB and everything we do, as far as tourism, So, and we're already doing it, I think, up there at the airport, but we'll continue to do it when I'm there,
Okay.
Okay, thank
Start
you.
asking for some money, Uncle Don.
Yeah, we need money.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Wheatley,
Nice, Senator.
congratulations.
Thank you, buddy.
Looking forward to working with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It wasn't a long interview, and that means you're in support.
Yes.
Donald, let me just say to the governor, lieutenant governor, that the appointment is just your appointment to serve as board of director at the airport authority is really, really, really good. Okay, and I just wanted to bring up something about, you mentioned something about the 40 police officers that is needed up at the airport, and I oversee the Committee on Public Safety, so I do have jurisdiction over trying to remediate some of the problems that we have up there in regards to the lack of law enforcement. And the biggest problem that I face right now is that I think police officers have to complete the Belaya program under the GCC.
Yeah.
And also, the police department are also having problems with the recruitment on that because you need to pass the EN 100 course before you get recruited. And they do have, they run into problems in as far as recruiting police officers. So my plan is, I wanted to include the Belaya program with that of the police officers at the airport and expand, instead of 2.5 for the Belaya, do it for 6 months. So maybe, and the reasoning for that is that I want to apply the 5 points that the veterans get on the initial entry. And I think our good senator here, Senator Telena, has brought that up already, because right now, as you go up into the ladder, the veterans are overpassing those people that have more service in the police department. That is because of the 5-point preference.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying here is that, it's easier said than done. And that's why I wanted to really expand the training, because there's only 2 courses that you need for the Belaya and the police department to gain that 5 points, and that is education and your physical training. So in that regards, do you think that would be a good idea to expand the training so that we can give those guys that don't have 5-point preference the 5 points when they graduate from the Belaya and the police training, so that they can also be part of that 5-point preference when they do the initial application for entry?
Well, excuse me, you're talking about the 5% preference for veterans?
The 5 points.
So
For veterans.
just to clarify, the bill that was passed within the legislature was to create an equity for those that are veterans, that they use the 5 points upon application of the job. In previous years, they were using the 5-point preference as veterans also for promotions. So we wanted to create some kind of equity for everyone that is looking to get promoted or to compete for promotion, to remove the 5-point preference. And just to clarify what Senator Terlahi is saying is that I believe he wants to include that upon completion of the Belaya, you will get a 5-point preference if you have completed the Belaya course.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that. Bill, I saw that. Yeah, the 5-point preference is the people are getting it when they begin employment, and then when they go up for promotion, they were getting it again, right? And you want to do away with that, which makes sense. But right now, some of the LTAs up there are serving as police officers, have like 17, 18 years as LTAs, you know? So, I mean, we just got to do justice by them, you know? So we'll look into it, but I don't know what all what did I say, 40-some vacancies up at the airport. I don't know how many of them are these. I think there's like, maybe my future chairman knows. He don't know. But we're going to be on that. We'll be looking into it, and I'm sure Tom's going to be working with the U committee.
And you know, Donald, Dan, I call you. I never call you Donald. I didn't know that he was Donald.
Yeah,
but I always call you Dan. But anyway, I've known you for the longest time. And you've always been loyal to supporting not only our government, but also our people, especially in the southern areas. So I support your appointment, and I also support the appointment of my friend over there, Dave, because I know I used to work with the wife under Senator Mark Forbes, and the appointment was a very good choice, good appointment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.
Mr. Weekly, I'd like to thank you for accepting this nomination. I also like to thank you for doing some extensive research on some of the challenges that the airport faces and bringing that into light during your confirmation hearing. There are times when some of the board appointees or even the directors come without really understanding the complexities or the need of the agency. So thank you very much for being well aware and getting ready to delve into the challenges that Guam Airport Authority has.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd like to endorse this guy to the left of me as my future boss.
All right. Thank you. We are now
do
done.
you want me to hang out around now, or
You can do
can I
whatever
go
you
back
like,
down
sir.
south?
Yes, you may do whatever you like. We are done with your confirmation hearing. Thank you. We are now going to hear testimony on the confirmation for Mr. Dan Tidinko with the AB Wanpat International Airport Authority Board of Directors. We have here to give oral testimony Troy Torres, Johnny Rosario. As I call your name, just please feel free to come up to the table. Leonora Leon Guerrero, Vivian Castro Leon, Bernadette Meno, Zena Santos, Tony Sanford. Okay. Lori Tidinko, David Tidinko, okay. Who's this? No, this one right here. Anita? Is this Anita? I'm sorry, I can't read your last name. If you're going to give oral testimony, please come forward. Sunyata. And do we have room for one more? Okay. So we'll start with you first, Mr. Torres, and then we'll go down the line of the roll call. Thank you.
Sijuis Masi, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Troy Torres, and I oppose the confirmation of Dan Tidinko to the airport board. Well, for the record as well, I am in full support of all the other nominees before your committee today, and they are wonderful people, and bravo to them. Many thanks to the men and women who sacrificed and risked their lives in America's wars, and to the legislators who have defended democracy through the fruits of war, so that a nobody like me could sit before you in open government to beseech and petition you to reject Dan Tidinko, a corrupt businessman and devilish politician, in his effort to continue his corruption from the Seaport Board onto the Airport Board of Directors. I'm sorry about my hoarse voice. I'm very familiar with Mr. Tydinko and his plunder of the Autonomous Port Authority for the financial benefit of corporate and personal interests. I am so familiar with his dealings that I can be considered a witness to his criminal enterprise. I welcome the Attorney General and the United States Attorney to bear witness to my testimony today, and if they so see fit, to depose me in any criminal case that is ongoing or has yet to begin. I first met Mr. Tydinko in 2009 when he became chairman of the 2010 gubernatorial campaign for the corrupt ex-governor Eddie Calvo and his criminal lieutenant governor Ray Tenorio, who currently is under trial in the Superior Court for violations of several laws. That was 10 years ago when I first met Dan Tydinko. There is a lot I have witnessed. For as many accolades and celebrations of achievement Mr. Tydinko may receive from his family, colleagues, and friends, or from his own pat on the back, your decision of his worthiness of the public's trust should be measured by my testimony and that of his victims. It isn't that we as citizens have testimony greater than anyone else's, it's simply that we were witnesses to his crimes. And as Mr. Tydinko and his FD buddies have said many times, criminals have no place in the government. Between 2009 and 2010, Mr. Tydinko used his influence to shape policy, particularly through the transition process of the incoming Governor Calvo. He affected policy matters that favored the company where he's an executive, GTA Teleguam Holdings. At the start of the administration, then Chief Information Officer Ed Cruz placed the government of Guam's telecommunications services through the procurement process for the first time. Mr. Tydinko used his personal friendship with Governor Calvo to lobby strongly against the procurement in order to keep GTA as the sole source provider of the thousands of telephone lines throughout Guam and of the government's burgeoning data systems. It was a multi-million-dollar contract. The governor became irate with Mr. Cruz at least twice a week during secret and unrecorded meetings of his senior staff, of which one of your members, one of your colleagues, also is a witness to. This started when the telecom bid went into litigation. It remained that way for years and finally was resolved, but not before Mr. Cruz was forced out of office by Governor Calvo at Mr. Tydinko's insistence. Corporate corruption at play, no doubt. That wasn't Mr. Tydinko's first time to have destroyed lives for political expedience. Earlier in his government career, when he was the Director of Policy and Planning for the Judiciary, he was made aware of a sexual assault case launched by a female marshal at the Superior Court of Guam against another marshal, Alan Eckley. Following months of justice stymied by Mr. Tydinko and the court's leaders at the time, the district court found the lower court's actions to have been reprehensible. Their conduct alienating the rights of this woman and promoting Eckley's disgusting criminal acts against her. In short, Mr. Tydinko and his colleagues tried to cover up the scandal. That cover-up allowed Eckley to continue to harass this woman in the workplace and eventually to evade criminal prosecution. Had Mr. Tydinko not treated this woman with such disrespect and ignorance, had Eckley been prosecuted when he should have, he likely would not have been hired back into the judiciary following the statute of limitations. I would comment more on that matter, however, I cannot for reasons that I'm sure will be known to the public in due course. While I've been one who never has judged others regarding personal conduct until recently, since Mr. Tydinko and his friends have been quick to judge mine, a reasonable person should expect that I'll meet an eye for an eye. That said, I truly hope that in the discussion among the 15 senators regarding Mr. Tydinko's confirmation, you all take into consideration his September 24, 1985 arrest for driving while intoxicated. While I may have my demons, I have never placed another person in harm's way dealing with my substance abuse issues. Mr. Tydinko did. It is yet further evidence of his reckless conduct that cannot be trusted to help steer the airport authority. Fast forward to his tenure at the Seaport Board, and you'll find crimes much worse than a traffic misdemeanor. As chairman of the port, Dan Tydinko blocked all staff involvement in critical cases concerning the port, most especially YTK, in which key managers were actively working to stop the suspicious transactions ongoing and to get the YTK property back into the hands of the agency. Staff had worked hard on an agreement to get that property back for about $600,000. But when Dan Tydinko and his vice chairman, Mike Benito from the Calvo family, came on board, everything stopped. The pressure came down heavy. He brought on Mike Phillips, and now, as you know, the port is on the hook to pay the Calvos nearly $17 million and growing with interest. By now, everyone has heard a lot about the Port 7 cases, and of course, we hear all the time in the media from Joanne Brown, Mike Phillips, and Dan Tydinko that these people are criminals. They just repeat it over and over without any basis of law and, in fact, without any criminal indictment against them. And believe me, they tried. Dan Tydinko used the influence of his brother at the AG's office. They went to the FBI, to the U.S. Attorney, and repeatedly badgered former AG Elizabeth Barrett Anderson to indict them, but they couldn't. Why? Because nobody committed any crimes, and I am a witness to that. Because this was nothing more than a political hack job driven with the cold heart of Daniel J. Tydinko. How about we just look at what Dan Tydinko and Mike Phillips accused Mary Torres of committing? In their warped and legally flawed investigation, Dan Tydinko and Mike Phillips accused Mary Torres of committing these crimes. 1, Dan Tydinko alleged that Senator Mary Torres may be charged with forgery under 9 GCA subsection 46-10. 2, Dan Tydinko alleged that Senator Mary Torres may be charged with misapplication of entrusted funds under 9 GCA subsection 46.70. 3, Dan Tydinko alleged that Senator Mary Torres may be charged with the crime of unlawful influence under 9 GCA subsection 49.40. 4th, Dan Tydinko alleged that Senator Mary Torres committed the offense of tampering with public records under 9 GCA subsection 955-10. 5th, Dan Tydinko alleged that Senator Mary Torres violated 5 GCA 22401, which prohibits expenditures which are not for an unauthorized purpose or exceeds the budgeted amount for such expenditures. So let me get this straight. To this day, Dan Tydinko continues to assert that these 7 employees, along with Senator Mary Camacho Torres, committed all these crimes. I mean, I understand that everyone should get a hearing before the legislature, but honestly, this corrupt official should never have had a chance to appear before this honorable body to ask again for your vote of confidence. He got your vote of confidence before, and he broke it along with numerous local and federal laws that have even the most prestigious federal law enforcement agencies working day and night to address. So why are we even here today? Do you really think things will be any different? Do you think that having prominent members of the community come forward today and vouch for this man that he will be better or do better on the next board? Do you believe Dan Tydinko or your own colleague, Senator Mary Camacho Torres? No. Dan Tydinko has shown time and again that when he is placed into a position of power, he abuses it. He pursues political and personal agendas. He enriches those closest to him and those he works for. He hurts people. He abuses the very seat of trust given to him by this esteemed body. I know many of you have received generous donations from Mr. Tydinko over the past few years or his company, GTA Teleguam Holdings. And although we don't like to admit that it matters, in reality, it does. So yes, he may have donated money. He may have attended some fundraisers. He may be lobbying behind closed doors now and sending powerful people to come and convince you to support his nomination. Look at the people behind me. Well, they're not behind me, but they're like literally behind me. Some of the most powerful and financially influential people on this island who have come to attest to the character of a very deceitful man. It says something about their character as well. I can't imagine that your base of voters thinks that confirming this man is the right thing to do. So don't listen to the intense lobbying efforts by Mr. Tydinko and his band of merry social elite, some of whom pay lip service to many issues like substance abuse, but have very serious crackhead issues all on their own. Listen to the voices in the villages, the real people, the ones who should matter the most. You know what I hear? I hear people pleading for justice, people praying for change, people standing against corruption. And none of those people, myself included, think that Dan Tydinko deserves another chance in public service. He betrayed the trust of the people when he was at the port. He should not be given another chance to hurt the people of Guam. This Lenten season, Roman Catholics are called to a season of sacrifice and then a celebration of renewal in a walk with the Lord, our Savior, Jesus Christ. In Constantine's account of the Gospels, the Lord said, quote, "Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and unto God what is God's." Some may think of this as the original order to separate church and state. I find it to be a paradox, especially for you, esteemed senators, who in our case here at home symbolize Caesar, the state. When all is said and done, Jesus does not ask us to choose between the state and his Father. With a time and a place for all things and all manner of thought, he asks us to do all things in righteousness. To do things righteously is not to be mutually exclusive between Caesar and God. God goes by other names according to one of the fathers and doctors of the church, Augustine, who aside from Christ and Constantine's teachings had the single greatest and most lasting effect on Catholicism as we know it today. God's other names are number, wisdom, truth, love, and light, candid. These virtues are wholly inclusive and inseparable to the conscience of the state, most especially to those of you entrusted with its keys by the people whom you govern and by the holiest of governors, our Lord. In this instance, as in every instance where conscience is demanded, you have the biblical and awesome duty to render to Caesar and to God precisely what number, wisdom, truth, love, and light demand. With Dan Tydinko, his darkness demands light. His plunder demands tough love. His crimes demand justice. Let colleague after colleague among the political and social elite of this island come before you and say the same thing over and over again, praising Dan Tydinko. All it is a big fat lie, just like the establishment is. It is a broken record of cronyism and corruption, judgment and deceit. It is a manicured set of liars, patrons of themselves and the almighty dollar, with nothing to show for all its pretense of charity, but a path of destruction, corruption, misery, and fear. But what is there to be fearful of? They are just 1% of us all. Today, the 99 rise. So sure, if I may be asked, this is about a vendetta. This is personal. It is about getting even. But at the end of the day, this isn't about me at all. I'm not being confirmed for anything more than the reconciliation of my conscience before God, before the night sets on my pillow in my humble home each night. This today is about justice. And if its spoils include the political and social demise of a pillar of this community who, through his hubris, arrogance, and greed has corrupted the public trust, then so be it. Let his legacy fall today. Allow his actions to speak for him. Give him his just deserve. In the final analysis, as he dug that dirt on so many innocent people, what he failed to realize, just as Napoleon failed to realize or fathom on his way to Waterloo, was that he dug his own grave. He has no one to blame but himself, and not any of you senators for rejecting his nomination. So he can take his gravedigger back and shove it where the sun don't shine. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Torres. Ms. Rosario?
Hi, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Senators. My name is Johnny Rosario. I come before you today firmly against the confirmation of Dan Tydinko for the GIA Board of Directors. The hallmark of a good government is that it is open and transparent and free from corruption. I've heard too many stories, seen too many documents, and listened to others speak about the history of Dan Tydinko to believe that he will be free from corruption if given the chance to serve us once again. I don't know Dan. Why does this testimony matter? Maybe it doesn't. I'm not rich, I'm not powerful, and I am just a regular person trying every day to keep my head above water to pay bills and raise my children. I struggle like so many others, so maybe what I say doesn't matter. But for far too long, I have stayed silent and have not spoken up against corruption. Even in my family, I have these issues. And now I am standing. Corruption is like cancer. If you don't fight it, then it continues to spread and take over. Well, no more. It stops with me today, and I take the stand against corruption on our island. Today, I ask you to take the stand against corruption, as well as to just say no to the confirmation of Dan Tydinko. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Senators. My name is Bernadette Meno, and I come before you today in firm opposition to the appointment and confirmation of Daniel J. Tydinko to the Guam International Airport Authority Board of Directors. Mr. Tithing is asking for you to confirm him to the position at the airport. But before even considering that request, it is critical that you take a look at his actions during his previous tenure as the chairman of the Port Authority of Guam. And when you judge whether he is worthy to serve on the airport board, then I think you will find that his actions were not only unethical, but clearly crossed over into criminal as well. Without going into too many details, I will confirm that I was contacted during the year 2018 by federal agents, specifically regarding the alleged illegal actions taken by Mr. Tithing and others against myself and the port employees that were terminated. That matter remains active in their hands, and it was the first glimmer of hope in many years that justice will soon come. As for what transpired at the port, it was the biggest political witch hunt in the history of our government, and it was all directed and executed by the very man who comes before you today, asking you to find him worthy, once again, of public service. How ironic, considering the great level of trust that comes with that responsibility. A trust that you will do what is ethically right, that you will not break the law, that you will not intentionally harm people for your own personal and political agendas. I am sure Mr. Tithing will bring so many important people before you today to tell you what a great person he is, how he does so many good things in the community. Mr. Tithing himself will probably tell you that we are not being honest, that he is right in what he did. But one only needs to look at several documents and look at the words coming from Mr. Tithing himself to know that he is the one not being honest, that he failed the true test of public service in his last position, and that he can't be trusted to hold another. The first document I am attaching is what is called the Gravedigger email. For the record, we knew this email existed as one board member who has stood up and stated that what Mr. Tithing did was wrong and criminal was brave enough to finally give us a copy for our defense. Yet this came after numerous refusals that it existed and outright denials of FOIA requests for this document. In this Gravedigger email, Mr. Tithing calls for an illegal meeting of the Board of Directors to be held in secret at Mike Phillips' law office and out of the view of the public. He called for this meeting to discuss what they would be doing to the 7 employees. And this meeting came right after he got his marching orders from Adelut. And in this email, Mr. Tithing, who now wants you to trust him to always serve the best interests of the government, is asked what he should bring to this meeting, what they should bring to this meeting. His response, how about a gravedigger? Let's just let that sink in a moment. A gravedigger, to bury us, to get rid of us for good. And this was before an investigation had even been started. How about a gravedigger? It is almost too shocking, too arrogant, and too deceitful to even comprehend. But let's not stop there. Let's take the words of someone that many of you know and trust, your colleague, Senator Mary Camacho Torres. I am attaching her statement to Mr. Tithing and his fellow board members, as well as her statements to the public after he fired her for refusing to terminate all of us. Please just take a moment and read the words of Senator Torres, a woman with an unwavering moral compass, a woman who, in the midst of the most intense political pressure that anyone could ever conceive, stood her ground and never changed her course because she believes in ethics and integrity in government. The day after we were terminated, and following her termination by Dan Tithing, Mary Torres held a press conference and issued a lengthy public and oral written statement to the media detailing why she refused to sign off on the adverse actions. With her husband, Justice Bobby Torres, and her brother, Governor Felix Camacho, by her side, she spoke at length about the deceitful actions of Dan Tydinko, Mike Phillips, Frank Ariola, and others. She said she was appalled and saddened that the port employees lost their jobs as a result of a, quote, politically motivated investigation, end quote. Senator Torres goes into detail about the pressure from Mr. Tydinko, Vice Chairman Benito, and Chief of Staff Frank Ariola to fire us. She said, quote, even though there was considerable political pressure on me to issue the NPAAs against the targeted employees, I was not willing to rubber stamp the NPAAs because I did not believe them warranted since they were based solely on the report of counsel, which I do not believe was a trustworthy document, end quote. All of these actions described by Senator Torres, these attacks on good and decent people, were orchestrated and carried out by the very man who comes before you today asking for your trust and your support. Senators, this was a horribly painful time for Mary Torres and for all of us. We were under constant attack by Mr. Tydinko, with him calling us criminals, trying to get every local and federal law enforcement agency to indict us, and yet her grace and her class carried her through and gave all of us hope. If you could only listen to the board meeting recordings, you would be shocked at how rude and demeaning Mr. Tydinko was on a regular basis to Senator Torres. He treated her and all the managers like that, but he really seemed to have a severe distaste for women managers, and most especially our general manager, Senator Torres. Yet despite the constant attacks by him, the demeaning rebukes and attitude, and his regular attempts to embarrass and belittle her, Senator Torres always held her head high and continued on her path of integrity and righteousness in public service. I implore all of you to read her words, because really, this will come down to whether you believe a man with a spotted record who is in the crosshairs of the federal government and federal law enforcement agencies, or your colleague, Senator Mary Camacho Torres, the daughter of our first elected governor, the sister of a former governor, the wife of a Supreme Court justice, the first ever female to lead both the seaport and the airport agencies, a senator who continues to earn the trust and confidence of the people of Guam. If you believe Senator Torres, then you have no other option than to reject the nomination of Daniel J. Tydinko to the Guam International Authority Board of Directors. In closing, the illegal actions that Dan Tydinko took while Port Board Chairman were atrocious. They destroyed lives, hurt families, and to this day, his actions continue to create despair and burden so many innocent people. But the silver lining is that his egregious actions brought together a group of people who, prior to this, were merely co-workers, barely acquaintances for some of us. But today, we are family. Our bond is strong, and together we have weathered this storm with a lot of prayer, a lot of tears, a lot of fear, and a whole bunch of love and respect. Over the many years that we have fought this battle, we have continued to pick each other up and encourage each other to face the day with our heads held high, knowing that we did nothing wrong and that justice will one day come. Your actions in rejecting the nomination of Daniel J. Tydinko will show to the people of Guam that you believe in honest leadership and an open and transparent government free from political retribution and intimidation, that you believe in justice. Thank you. And if I may, I don't know if this is allowed, there are 2 employees who did not feel they had the courage to hold their composure and have asked if I could read their statements.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. Hafaday, I submit this testimony in opposition to the confirmation of Daniel J. Tydinko to the Guam Airport Authority Board of Directors. My name is Leonora V. Leon Guerrero, and I am one of the 7 Port Authority of Guam employees terminated at the direction of Dan Tydinko. Please allow me to provide you with a background history regarding my prior employment with the port and the events that have occurred since then. I was terminated by the port on February 25, 2013, which an appeal was filed with the CSC. A merit hearing was held on June 17th, 18th, 24, 26, July 1st, 3rd, 9th of the year 2014, which the majority of the commissioners ruled in my favor and ordered my reinstatement. Subsequently, after the hearing, the port filed an appeal with the Superior and later Supreme Courts of Guam. The case has been tied up for years in the court as Mr. Tithing and former General Manager Joanne Brown directed the continued litigation at a very expensive cost to me and my family. A recent Supreme Court ruling dealing with the burden of proof now brings my case back to the CSC for further discussions on the burden of proof. Needless to say, many years of litigation has been overwhelming both financially and emotionally. During the onset of this event, I was the most infant in the rank and file of this group, and that was terminated. I was just beginning my career with the Port Authority of Guam and was employed for only 4 years and 11 months. I joined this agency in March of 2008 with hopes to successfully contribute to the agency with my expertise and skills and to be instrumental in the movement of positive change within the agency and to the island. But when Mr. Tithing directed this investigation to take place, he had his legal counsel come after me and harass me. I was subjected to harassment by the PAG legal counsel Mike Phillips while being questioned about documents and trying to be influenced under false pretense to take a direction toward an events that never occurred. Legal counsel yelled at me, threatened me if I did not change my story. I was told I would be criminally prosecuted if I did not say what they wanted me to say. But I refused to lie for Dan Tithing and Mike Phillips, and so I was fired and accused of committing crimes. To be clear, during my time at the port, I never refused or failed to perform my duties and responsibilities as a planner work coordinator. I never falsified any records. I never misused or stole government property. I have, however, refused to lie on behalf of the port's legal counsel. As required by Guam law, I advised my immediate supervisor of the port legal counsel's misconduct. After my meetings with the port legal counsel, my supervisor approached me and explained that Attorney Phillips instructed him to return to the office and tell me that I was going to lose my job and that criminal charges would follow. I believe that this adverse action and termination was proposed by Dan Tithing and legal counsel in an attempt to discredit or silence me. I also believe that this proposed adverse action was in retaliation for my refusal to say that Mary Torres or Vivian Leon directed me to do anything. So yes, despite this traumatic experience, I stood my ground. I was shocked that the board chairman, Dan Tithing, the very individual that we as employees trusted to have the best interest of the employees and the port at heart, would go to such great lengths to lie about events and destroy so many innocent people. And for the record, having been wrongfully terminated and publicly defamed is one of the most humiliating things an individual can endure. But even in my most fearful and darkest moments regarding this event, not once have I ever thought of benefiting myself so as to lie for Dan Tithing, Mike Phillips, Joanne Brown, and others just to keep my job. Integrity and accountability is everything to me with respect to my duties and responsibilities that I have been entrusted to carry out both in my civilian and military career. In no way, shape, or form have I or ever will I allow my integrity to be compromised. Sadly, we can't say the same for Mr. Daniel J. Tithing. I urge you to reject his nomination. Si Julis Maasi, Leonora V. Leon Guerrero. The last testimony, Vivian Castro Leon. Hafaday, Senator Nelson, and committee members, I respectfully submit this testimony in connection with the legislative confirmation of Daniel J. Tithing to the AB WANPAT International Authority, Airport Authority Board of Directors. For the record, my name is Vivian Castro Leon, and I submit this in my personal capacity as a citizen of Guam and as a former employee of the Jose D. Leon Guerrero Commercial Port of Guam from 1977 to 2012. First, I would like to make it known that I am one of the Port 7 who was terminated on December 18, 2012, as a result of a politically motivated investigation which Tithing spearheaded under the direction of former Governor Eddie B. Calvo. Since the mid-1980s, I have known Tithing because of the friendships he had with my brothers, Rick and Ron Castro, in graphic art and advertisement industry, and when he was a staff member with the executive and legislative branches. I recall talking with someone when Tithing started his career in the judicial branch that if he pursued a calling in the political arena, he would one day make a good public servant. Boy, did he prove me wrong on this perception. When Dan Tithing was board chairman for the port from February 21st, 2011 to January 13th, 2014, I observed that he possessed the traits of a horrible leader. He was arrogant, lacked transparency, didn't listen, dismissed staff suggestions, had a huge ego, lacked empathy, and was extremely closed-minded. How did I come to this conclusion? It was through my observations in the manner in which he directed the outcome of certain port real estate issues, i.e. Casimar option year negotiation, Guam YTK litigation, IP&E easement lease, mobile management agreement, Aqua World lease amendment, etc. He either disregarded staff recommendations or intentionally delayed the movement of such leases by assigning it to current legal counsel, some of which were given to him 6 years ago and still have not been completed. What affirmed this observation and his obsessive focus on ensuring the livelihood of the Port 7 is ruined, to include a media slander campaign calling us criminals even to this day. In 2013, then Port Management at the direction of Tithing filed complaints with federal law enforcement agencies and local attorney general's office aggressively pursuing an investigation and indictment against the Port 7. Over 6 years have passed since their complaints have been filed, and not a single indictment has been handed down. What I have been told by federal and local law enforcement officials is they reviewed the complaints, and in their opinion, we did nothing wrong to warrant an indictment. I have enclosed a document on one of his shocking comments about the Port 7. On October 2012, he emailed the then Port board members and said, quote, "There's a need for us to meet tomorrow at Mike Phillips' office at 1100 hours. One board member responded and asked, quote, "Do we need a priest, referee, fireman, videographer," end quote. Tithing responded, quote, "How about a grave digger," end quote. The response he provided proves a predetermined decision had been made on the fate of our employment and all of our livelihoods. By the way, this meeting he referred to was in violation of the open government law, which all of the board members attended and discussed the fate of the Port 7 and instructed Port Legal Counsel to prepare a faulty investigation to substantiate our terminations. His pursuit against the Port 7 through the actions of former general manager and Port Legal Counsel caused so much stress not only on me, but my family members. But what I can say was the silver lining of this incident is the strong bond that glued the Port 7 together to fight for our integrity, character, and to redeem our reputation as quality individuals. Tithing didn't realize the submerging political retribution he was pursuing will be the final nail in the coffin for his career as a public servant. I have told many people it is sad the individuals who were involved in our terminations would one day have their reputations tainted because Dan Tithing pursued a personal and political vengeance on behalf of the former governor. So I humbly ask you and the senators, when deliberating as to whether Tithing's nomination should be confirmed, I request that you keep this quote in mind. Quote, "If one desires for a higher position within an organization, his desires should not be for prestige, fame, or power, but for the privilege of serving others," end quote. To me, Dan Tithing should not be given the privilege to serve as a public servant for AB Wanpat International Airport Authority Board of Directors because he will only serve his own interests and those select few he is affiliated with and not look at the interests of the people of Guam. Siju Ismasi, Vivian Castro Leon. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Meno. Mr. Tithing, Mr. David Tithing.
Yeah, half a day, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. My name is David Tithing. I am presently Managing Director and CEO of Valley of the Latte, and that's only because my wife says I can do that, because she's the majority shareholder. And I'm actually here to testify in support of my primo, Dan Tithing. I previously served in various capacities in the hospitality industry, One is chairman of the board for the Visitors Bureau for about 8 years under Governor Felix Camacho, and I also serve as president of the Hotel and Restaurant Association. I'm keenly aware of the critical partnership and synergy that must be maintained between tourism industry partners and the Guam International Airport Authority policymakers and leadership to assure the success of Guam's #1 economic driver. Dan's years of experience in both government and private sector, I believe, brings the knowledge and skill sets necessary to effectively manage this partnership and make it grow stronger. He has a proven track record of success, and his willingness to continue his public service is a testament to his commitment to our island. I thank you again for allowing me to testify in support of Daniel J. Tydinko's appointment to the Board of Directors of the Guam International Airport Authority. Zusmasi.
Thank you. Ms. Sanford?
Buenas and half a day, Madam Vice Speaker and the rest of the senators that are here present today. Thank you for allowing this public hearing to take place and for allowing the public to present their input and their perspectives. My name is Tony Sanford. I was born here, lived here all my life. Most of you know I've been a co-founder of Sanford Technology. It's my lifeline. I served as a senator in the 27th Guam legislature many moons ago, and I'm happy to be here in support of the nomination of Mr. Dan Tydinko for the Board of Directors for AB Wampat International Airport Authority, known as Guam International Airport. Madam Vice Speaker Nelson, I submit this letter in support of the nomination of Mr. Dan Tydinko to serve as a board member of the Guam International Airport Authority. Dan is currently the Executive Vice President for Teleguam Holdings, DBA GTA, and has been with them for the last 9 years. He was Director of Policy, Planning, and Community Relations for the Judiciary of Guam for 6 years, and prior to that, he was Executive Officer for the Supreme Court of Guam for 8 years. He spent the last 25 years in various leadership positions in both government and private industry, always motivating his team for ultimate achievement and success. In his younger years, back in 1984, he served as a congressional aide for the late Congressman A.B. Wampat. How ironic that 35 years later, after serving as an intern, working hand in hand, and learning from our local and brilliant Congressman A.B. Wampat in Washington, D.C., Dan is now being considered to serve as a board member for the Guam International Airport Authority, appropriately named as the A.B. Wampat International Airport. Dan offers a stellar board policy and leadership experience as past chairman of the board for the Port Authority of Guam between 2011 and 2014. A strategic visionary, gifted in implementation skills, his leadership brought resolution to the port's chronic issue of operational gantry cranes and initiated the port's current ongoing operational modernization plan. In 2012, he served on the National Ports Caucus Advisory Board, whose mission is to promote the importance of ports to the nation's economy and the need to secure them. Though we've been close family friends forever, I've not had the opportunity to work directly with Dan until 2 years ago when we began working together as part of our political committee during this recent 2018 election. Here I discovered a humble visionary with integrity, a stickler for details, a team player, and a leader with the courage to speak his mind, though perhaps alone in his perspective. These personal traits will serve to benefit any policy-making board. As past chair of the Guam Chamber of Commerce Board, past chair of the University of Guam Board of Regents, and a founding director of the Guam Women's Chamber of Commerce, I believe that Dan Tydinko, as a Guam Airport International Board member, will assist greatly with the mission, which is to develop and promote competitive international and regional aviation services that ensures the safety and security for all travelers while supporting the economic growth of our island. Madam Vice Speaker, I thank you for having this legislative hearing and allowing the public's input. I ask your favorable support and those of your fellow senators for Mr. Dan Tydinko's board nomination. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sanford.
Thank you.
Thank you, and happy Women's Day to you as well. Mr. Sadiata, happy Women's Day.
I'll pass it along to my 5 sisters. You know, my father taught me when I first started working for him. He said, if you can't write a letter in one page, don't bother writing it. So with that wisdom, you're lucky because I have just 1 page. Good afternoon, Senators. I am here in support of Dan Tydinko to serve on the AB Wanpat International Airport Board of Directors. I have known Dan for over 40 years. I know him to be an intelligent, dedicated, and loyal person. I also know him to have a wealth of experience in multiple sectors of government and private sector work. He does very well for his current employer, GTA, and showed leadership and drive in his work with the Leon Guerrero Tenorio transition team and report. Having once served on the AB Wanpat International Airport Authority Board of Directors in 2013 to 2014, I know Dan's talents, experience, intelligence, and leadership will be an asset to the Guam International Airport Authority Board. I hope this committee will approve his appointment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Etta. I will continue to go down the roster. Ms. Donna Munya Kanata, Mr. Thomas Fisher, Mr. Phil Torres, Mr. Marcel Camacho, Mr. Romeo Carlos. Oh, okay, we'll start with you, Miss. Yes, please go ahead and have a seat, Miss Ariola. Miss Joanne Brown. And Miss Francine Rocio? No? Okay. We'll start with Attorney Ariola. We missed you on that list. I think it was the name I couldn't understand.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Miss Anita. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Vice Speaker Nelson, and Chairwoman of the committee, and members of the committee. It is with great honor that I write to support the confirmation of Dan Tydinko as a member of the AB Wanpat International Airport Authority Board of Directors. I have known Dan for many years. He was a classmate of my brother Frank in the class of 1979 at the Father Duenas Memorial School, and he is a longtime family friend. Dan has worked in all 3 branches of the Guam government: the judiciary, the Guam legislature, and the office of the governor. He also worked in the U.S. House of Representatives under Congressman A.B. Wanpat. There are not many individuals who have that distinction. Dan's experiences have enabled him to develop a broad base of knowledge and expertise about public policy and government operations. For example, he worked with my mother, former Senator Elizabeth P. Ariola, on significant and landmark measures such as the Safe Streets Act, the Child Abuse and Neglect Reporting Act, the Victims' Bill of Rights, and the Supreme Court of Guam Judicial Reorganization Act. When Dan was chairman of the Port Authority Board of Directors, I represented clients who had business transactions with the port. I appeared regularly at board meetings. I observed Dan to be a judicious, competent, and dedicated board member. Dan is also a successful businessman. He could continue to be occupied solely by his business interests, but he chooses to be involved in public service. He has spent decades in public service. He is motivated by a desire to make Guam a better place to live and the need to improve government services to our people. In all the years I have known Dan, he has demonstrated exceptional skill and competence. I recommend Dan without reservation. I am confident that he will make a valuable addition to the GIAA board. I'm open to any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Ms. Ariella. Ms. Brown, we'll just walk down the steps. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to come before you and provide testimony in support of Dan Tydinko's appointment to the Guam Airport Authority Board. I have to tell you, I had preferred if the governor had actually appointed Dan back to the Port Authority. Certainly, you heard from earlier testimony, emotional as it may be, sometimes when you're in a position of leadership, as you all are experiencing yourself, sometimes you have to make difficult decisions. Decisions not everyone is always going to agree about, and certainly this will not be the time or place that we can debate the cases of the termination of these employees that have provided testimony. I would recommend you actually look at the case, look at the cases before the Civil Service Commission, look at the cases that have been ruled by the court, including the Supreme Court of Guam, and look at that and look at the details of that. Certainly, if you're in the other end and you're not on the winning end of an issue or things don't go in your favor, it's very easy to simply say the reason they didn't go in your favor is because the other party's wrong and you're right. What happened to the Port Authority of Guam, and I'm not going to belabor it long because I know there are other people that are here to testify, but when you are in a position as he was at the time, when things are happening that should not be happening, and certainly when you're on the board, you have the responsibility to set policy. And if things are being mismanaged, you have responsibility to do something about that. And unfortunately, the decisions that were made, while not popular, obviously to the people that were impacted by it, you have to make decisions in the best interests of the port and in the best interests of the public. It's very easy to take personality issues and attack each other, attack one's character, because decisions didn't go your way or you didn't like the decisions the board made. They weren't made individually and solely by Dan Tydinko, they were made by the board. You had different members of this community that came together and made a decision. I've known Dan Tydinko not as long as some, but I've known him about 24 years when I first became a member of the Guam legislature. He actually worked for then Senator Tom Etta, and that's the first time I actually met him. I didn't know him personally. I did know of his mom and dad. His mom, who worked at the Guam Waterworks Authority, and his dad, certainly the times he would come to Guam EPA when I was a deputy director there with projects that he was pursuing. And his sister, who I have to say back in the day, and for those of us that remember when she was our chief prosecutor, what a phenomenal lady. You know, now it's the time of women here, but boy, you know, 25, 26 years ago, Frances Tydinko Gatewood, when she was chief prosecutor, was impressive. And so I ended up meeting Dan Tydinko, who just happened to be her brother. And I'm like, oh, okay, he must be okay because he's Frances's brother. And we were on opposite sides of the aisle. We were at a time of controversy in the 23rd Guam legislature when we had a coalition, so we were not friends. And so it's kind of ironic, here I am all these years later here to testify in supporting his nomination. And while you've heard a lot of information attacking his character, that has not been my experience. And some may say, oh, the reason you say that, Joanne, is because you became the general manager of the port. But it's a position I didn't ask for, didn't seek, never applied for. But in my time of directly working with him as a port GM, I found him to be very smart, very strong, very, I guess the word to say is he had expectations of people. He had expectations of people to perform their job and perform them well. And he took the Port Authority from where it was in the past to where it is now, assuming it's not messed up with the management that's there, and they carry it forward. A very successful operating entity in the government of Guam financially, in terms of accountability, in terms of its finances, in terms of its physical operation, its equipment, its resources. It's unprecedented where the Port Authority of Guam is today, and certainly where it was 7 or 8 or 9 years ago. And a lot of that had to do with his vision. And a lot of that had to do with his leadership. And at the end of the day, you have to work with your colleagues, as you do here, whether you agree or disagree on issues. You have to work together, as he did with his fellow board members. So I'm just saying, please don't make judgment on what you hear today on testimony about the termination of the port employees. Look at the record. Look at the Supreme Court ruling on one of the cases that identified who and when and who knew what and who didn't take action. When documents get generated during an investigation, when they get backdated, when they get falsified, those things are illegal in the government. I'm not going to get into those details. Again, that's something, if you would take the time to look at this before you make a vote on his confirmation, please do. It's easy to play your colleagues against each other about who's right or wrong, or think that someone's always perfect, and they never make mistakes or they never have bad judgment. I'd like to say that about myself, but I can't. We always sometimes in the course of our learning process don't make the best decisions. And some people just didn't make the best decisions at that time. I don't think that takes away from the actions of Dan Tithing as a chairman of the board to hold people accountable, to hold management accountable, and ultimately ensure that the employees that work at the port don't misuse public resources for their own agenda. If this is the price you have to pay for standing up, God help anyone else in the government of Guam who wants to get up and speak out or take action against improper, illegal, unethical activities occurring. It's not easy to do that. It's not easy to do that when it might be a friend or family member or someone you've known, and you have to take that action. It's very difficult because Guam's a very small community. At some point, your paths are going to cross again. And he took the hard route. He could have turned a blind eye and just let it go because of who's who and who's what and who's connected to who, and he didn't do that. Does Dan Tithing need to sit on the Guam Airport Authority Board personally? No. I don't think his success and where he will continue to go in his life will be limited in any way because he doesn't sit on the Guam Airport Authority Board. He's successful in his own right. He's worked in all three branches of government. Even though we got, dissed earlier that anyone who testifies against or in favor of him, were terrible people. I don't think that's the case at all. I think sometimes you don't know what you're made of till you go through the fire. Well, he's walking that. He's living that. And I think he's done an exceptional job in his life and his career and the family that he comes from and that he was raised in. The fact that he's still willing, even though at a personal level he's successful, will continue to be successful in his life and in his future, is still willing to contribute his resources and his capabilities to continue to serve the community that he lives in spite of the adversity. Because I'm sure he's not shocked about what happened today. I'm sure if he had been reappointed 6 years ago to the Port Authority Board, he probably would have heard this and 10 times over. The accusations that are being made against him in serving in his capacity as chairman because he had to make some tough decisions. Well, sometimes tough decisions need to be made. And I'd rather have someone who has the capability of doing that in spite of the adversity he has to encounter and make things better. I don't think it's hard to argue the Port Authority is not better today because of the actions and the decisions that he made as chairman during his service. And I think if you look at the issues and the facts and take out the emotions, you're going to see that he made some very good decisions. And they're beyond the cases of the Port 7 that are being presented today. In terms of completing the expansion projects, the purchase of the port cranes, everything that led the way for his successor, Frank Santos, including the procurement of the equipment, the tremendous success of the Port Authority in the bond market last year to have the single highest rating in the entire history of the government of Guam the very first time out. That's unprecedented. And that doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen just because you talk about it. It requires a lot of work and effort of a lot of people that pull those resources together. And his leadership will be a complement to the Airport Authority if you do confirm him. But I'm saying look a little deeper. There's more to this than what appears so easy to talk, requires so little effort. Looking at the details and looking at what the facts are. If you make that extra effort, I think you're going to find that Dan Tithing, not only is he worthy of the job, I think he'll do an even better job if you provide him that opportunity to serve on the airport board. Thank you very much for the opportunity to provide comment.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Fisher?
Yes, good afternoon, Senators, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Thomas Fisher. I am an attorney in private practice here on Guam, and I am here to testify strongly in support of confirmation of Mr. Dan Tithing to the Guam International Airport Authority. Before I begin, though, I feel as a citizen as well as a person who is testifying that I have to report to you what I believe to have been a contempt made against this body by Mr. Torres. As he left the room, he made an obscene gesture towards to you, the right side of the room, which is the Tithing family, I would also note that this obscene gesture was made towards a sitting federal judge. I think that is a contempt. In fact, I was here looking at my smartphone trying to see if you guys...
Mr. Fisher, if I may ask, can we please focus on the confirmation
Yes.
of Mr. Tydinko, please?
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you,
I'll get-
and we can do those things elsewhere, but right now
Well-
we're here to talk about the confirmation hearing for Mr. Tydinko.
Okay, that's fine, Senator.
Thank
I was
you.
just going to wrap that up and suggest that perhaps the Sergeant at Arms might like to look at that. I've been on Guam for about 25 years, and one of the first families I met when I came here in a professional capacity was the Tydinko family. I think that Francis Tydinko then was the chief prosecutor, and I think Phil at that point he might have been in private practice, but at some point he became, when Francis was elevated to the bench, Phil became the chief prosecutor, one of the best bosses I've ever had. Also in this time period, I also got a chance to meet Dan professionally. And as nobody will dispute, he comes from an absolutely fine family of significant note. And Dan is, he hasn't fallen far from the other fruit from that tree. I was thinking of the words the adjectives that I would use to describe him. And I was jotting them down. Integrity came to mind. And all the time I've known Dan, one thing I can say for sure is his word is his bond. If he tells you, if he represents something to you, he'll stand behind it. He'll fulfill that representation to him. Closely allied with that quality is trustworthiness. He is an extraordinarily trustworthy individual. Again, his word is his bond. And as you can just look back to his career and the number of people who are here to realize that he is an extraordinarily competent person. The Guam International Airport Authority is one of the most important economic generators here on island, and you can feel absolutely secure in laying responsibility in Dan's hands to make sure that he prosecutes that office well. The person that was described by others earlier in this session is not a person that I recognize. It's not a person who exists. This person who has sat through this calumny, frankly lies, doesn't exist. The person who does exist is a man of honor, trustworthy, competent, and someone in whom you can rest your confidence. And I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to express this and also join other people in support of Dan Tydinko. And also, it makes me proud to come here and support Dan. And I hope that you will also vote for his confirmation. Thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Mrs. Kanata?
Can you hear me now? Good afternoon. My name is Donna Munya Kinata, and for the record, I just want you all to know, for those who don't know, I am the twin sister of Speaker Tina Munya Barnes. So if you're watching out there and they're wondering why Tina is supposed to be sitting on this side or why she's sitting on this side, no, I am not Tina, I'm Donna. So today I come before you to humbly ask that you support and vote for Daniel J. Tydinko. And why? 3 simple words if I had to describe Dan: intelligent, a leader, and loyal. Intelligent, just a quick one. For those of you who don't know, Dan Tydinko is supposed to be a graduate of the class of '80, but he got promoted, skipped a grade, and now he's the class of '79. So Dan, I always said, you're supposed to be my classmate, but oh well. Intelligent that you are. As a leader, if Dan is willing to throw his hat in the arena after being appointed from our governor and lieutenant governor to want to serve the people of Guam, then please, it is only for you up there to decide and to say yes on this confirmation. Because I know that the people of Guam are going to get a good man who's not afraid to make those hard decisions, those decisions that sometimes we do not want to make. But I have faith, and I stand behind Dan today. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Flores?
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, and your fellow senators, members of the committee. I'm Phil Flores, and I come here today to testify in favor of the nomination of Dan J. Tithing. The first time, well, we talked about working for Congressman Wampat and the Wampat Authority Airport. The first time I met Dan was 82 or 84, when I was then the chairperson of the late Congressman and General Ben Blas's campaign, and he was a member of Congressman Wampat's campaign staff. And you might guess we didn't quite see eye to eye back then, and especially when we had the recount in '84. But over the years, as I got to know Dan better, got to respect him, his integrity, his hard work, his straightforward demeanor. And on that respect, fortunately, I was able to build a good, firm friendship with Dan, and which lasts till today. I'm also good friends with his wife, Lori, and if you haven't been to the Cracked Egg lately, you're missing out. You know, I'm a minor investor in Guam Telephone Authority. And one of the reasons, and I really say minor, one of the reasons we put our money in there is because they had locals in the C-suite offices. Dan was one of them. He's an executive vice president of Teleguam, which we know as GTA. You don't get to be an EVP of a company like that unless you got something going on really well. And the point that I'm getting to, I guess, is that Dan's a really good business person. Dan's a really good person that runs an important part of a company that I would invest money in. So in my close, I want you to please accept his nomination, confirm his nomination. If you do, I know he'll give it 100% effort, which will be to the complete benefit of the people of Guam. In closing, we heard earlier things today, and it brought to mind the words of Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela said, "Seeking revenge on another person is like drinking poison and hoping he dies." Okay, one more in closing. As I walked into the building today, I saw Anita, and my first words were, "How'd it go today?" She goes, "Our prayers were answered, and her brother had a very successful heart operation." Bless you, sister. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flores. Mr. Romeo Carlos?
Let me first apologize. I'm not a public speaker, so forgive me if my voice is low or I babble a bit. To start off, I'd like to remind the previous speaker, Mr. Flores, that what Nelson Mandela was talking about, revenge and justice, he was actually very clear about the difference between justice and revenge. The people who showed up here today to speak against the nomination of Dan Tithing for the airport board position are seeking justice, not revenge.
Mr. Carlos, if you could please address the body on the confirmation of Mr.
Looking
Tithing.
forward?
Yes, please. Thank you.
It's kind of hard looking at a bunch of people.
I know.
But,
Thank you.
Okay.
We're here for the
but
confirmation
the
of
idea
Dan
is
Tithing.
justice is not revenge. And I think it's unfair to try to frame the context of what we're hearing today by the individuals who were wronged under the leadership of Mr. Dan Tithing at the port as anything less than seeking justice and trying to use humor to mask it or misappropriating the language and calling it revenge. It's not revenge. There's been a lot said today, and with the exception of this second round of very positive statements in support of their friend and their family, I see few people the first speaker, the second, and Ms. Canada, who don't really seem to have any vested interest, who actually have come today to the table with their integrity unimpugned and without question. I write, as many of you know, something called the Guam blog, and I've been following this case from the beginning. I don't know the Taydinkos personally. I didn't know who Dan was until numerous individuals who were wronged at the port began sending my blog information about what was happening there. In a nutshell, we've heard in a positive sense how long Dan has served and how many different branches he served in. And I'm asking you today, as a body that was chosen just a few months ago looking for change, to keep that in mind when you're voting. That's not change. That's actually the very idea of the type of corrosive element in government that has alienated so many of our voters, that keep them disengaged. If you don't mind, just to go over a few points. When you talk about character, as has been discussed here in favor of Dan Tadinko, I'd like to remind you that character is not what you do in public. That's your reputation. Character is the decisions you make, the actions you take when no one's looking. And we know very well what actions were taken. What we also know is the hubris, the absolute arrogance in shaming and slandering an entire family, an honorable family. I met Miss or Senator Mary Torres because of this. It was reprehensible what they did, which was an outright lie and falsehood, characterizing her as a criminal, smearing her name, her good family name, her entire family, for a political agenda. There were numerous different ways to get rid of the individuals they wanted to get rid of. It's politics. I'm not, a delusionary snowflake. There are ways of doing the game. But to have to do it so viciously, to destroy people's lives just to remove an individual with institutional knowledge that might upset the YTK scheme was wrong, point blank wrong. That scheme cost taxpayers to date up to $7 million in legal billings and growing. $17 million that every man, woman, and business on Guam will have to pay to Champ Calvo, the first governor of the cousin, and very good friends with the gentleman in question today. Maybe gentleman is the wrong word, but I'll get to that later. But that is not the kind of leadership you need at the airport, whose economic value to this island is unquestionable. The question is, if in fact he was such a good leader, why do we overpay for such crappy cranes? That's not my opinion. The previous legislator, the current public auditor, will write you a book on what was wrong with the crane purchases. When you talk about what happened at the port under the leadership, you cannot ignore the fact that one of the people that was involved, that sat at the table in the scheme to get rid of these 7 people, testified earlier. Because of his delivery, a lot of you may want to discount or use it as an excuse to discount what he says. But Troy Torres was given the specific role, and I blogged about it extensively. And if you really need it, although I'm sure you don't, I will send you all the stories. But he sat there and he told you how this plot developed, who did what, and how it was executed, and the role he played. Now, looking for redemption and payback, he's putting the truth out there for you. Today, yeah, you do have a decision to make. You can sit here and ignore what was said today by the people who are seeking justice. Joanne Brown said it's not easy to make the hard decision. It's not easy to come out and do what's right. And she is absolutely right about that. And they came out today in very small numbers. Vivian Leon, whom the federal personnel who do business with the port have frequently called the it girl for her extensive background and ability to get things done, was removed because she knew about the Casimir and the YTK plots. She was too influential politically. You know, it's politics. You want to move her out so you have a better chance of winning, fine. But the way they did it, like I said, was wrong. And now you want to put this leadership that follows orders, no matter how wrong they are, at the airport. You guys were not voted into office to be a rubber stamp of corruption or for corruption. Adelup made the onerous mistake of putting his name in contention for this position, despite the fact that they ran on a campaign promises of change. I don't see how someone who's been, what was it said earlier, 40 years in service, public service, all three branches, doing this kind of dastardly crap when no one's looking, and when they're looking, even worse. How is that change? It is up to you. We, the people, come to you guys to put a stop to that. And it has to be said. The first woman governor, you mean to tell me you cannot find a woman, someone of much higher caliber and integrity for that position? I can think of one sitting up there right now. There's a board member who has the background, the skills, Shelley Gibson, that's another one. There are other people, including women, who should have been offered the equal opportunity instead of passing this candidacy opportunity to an individual who's already got a very questionable background and a lapse in moral character, who demonstrates clearly an inappropriate turpitude. I was physically assaulted by this guy in public. Physically assaulted by a drunken Dan Tadinko. I don't think that's the character suitable for a representative of our government in a place as important as the airport's board of directors. It is beneath me to reduce myself to fisticuffs like some common alley cat in a street fight. The education and class levels that are repeatedly reinforced here by those in support of him were completely lacking and not apparent. Tom Fisher told this body he didn't recognize this guy. I have the name of a good optometrist that you might benefit from.
Mr. Carlos,
there are hundreds of families, if not thousands, who recognize that guy.
Mr. Carlos, thank you for your testimony. If you can please refrain from addressing others that have given testimony for this purpose. Please refrain from calling them by name. We want to have a very professional testimony dialogue here. So please just stick to the facts, and if you can
facts,
just not
but I will
name
try to
them
rephrase
by
them so
name,
they're
it would-
appropriate.
yeah, thank you, thank you.
There are a lot of reasons today for you guys to really sit back and consider your vote. We're always going to have someone on our side, and we'll always have someone who's not on our side. But there's a track record in existence. There's a media track record, and as has been pointed out repeatedly, there's a colleague of yours sitting up there who is very open, I'm sure, to discussing this honestly, because that's one of the things she's known for. So your choice today is really coming down to a decision between believing someone with impeccable integrity and someone who brings to the table a lot of negative baggage and a lot of doubts and good reason for those doubts. I'm sure his friends really do think he's a great guy. That's why they're his friends. But humor, light banter are insufficient for such a decision with this kind of gravitas at risk. There are more qualified, more dependable, and I would say more honorable individuals available for this position, and I hope that you consider long and hard before you vote in favor of the nomination of Dan Tadinko for the airport. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carlos. Is there anyone that would like to give further testimony in regards to the confirmation hearing of Mr. Dan Tadinko? Okay. Mr. Tadinko, I will welcome you forward to provide your testimony. Thank you, everyone, for giving testimony.
Off a day, Vice Speaker, Chairwoman Nelson, and members of the committee and senators. Thank you very much for according me the opportunity to appear before you concerning my nomination to the AB Wanpat Airport Board of Directors. I'm appreciative and grateful for the confidence Governor Liu and Lieutenant Governor Josh have in me with their appointment of me to serve. I'm also heartened by the expressions of support by those here today, as well as those who have submitted testimony in support of the confirmation. Should I garner the support of the legislators to serve on that board, I'm looking forward to diving into the vast number of issues presently facing the international airport. I hope to help contribute in some meaningful way alongside the other board directors with the management team up there. Former Senator Tom Atta, now executive manager at the airport, and I have had a very long personal and professional relationship spanning over 3 decades. I served as his chief of staff in another lifetime. And since then, we have collaborated on legislative initiatives concerning infrastructure and telecommunications. More recently, we served on the advisory team for the current governor and lieutenant governor, and we served on their transition team as well. Soon after the election of the new administration, he informed me he was being tapped by the administration to handle the daily operations of the airport. He indicated to me that he was looking forward to his new role and noted he was looking forward to continued collaboration with me, potentially as a board director. Aside from just genuinely wanting to help the administration, one of the key factors in my decision to resume public service in this capacity is knowing that Tom is at the helm of the airport operations. Over the course of the past few weeks, I've been immersing in the issues before the airport, from the vast capital improvement projects constructing a new international arrivals corridor, which is well underway, to security checkpoints, a new firefighting facility, and other projects. There's a lot of hammering and drilling taking place. Since seeing the completion of these projects while helping the management responsibly expend and account for the resources used here is a major priority. In my prior board experience at the Port Authority, I helped oversee and manage a significant chunk of the nearly $200 million earmarked for modernizing the port and the Agana and Agate marinas. Former port GMs then, Pedro Leon Guerrero, Senator Mary Torres, and Joanne Brown did a good amount of the heavy lifting for the great improvements we see today at those facilities. I refer to this because major capital improvements had not taken place for nearly 34 years back until then. Presently, the work going on at the airport is the largest scale project to take place there since 1988. The International Arrivals Corridor project is overdue and sorely needed. Staff informed me that the call for the expansion dates back to almost immediately post 9/11. And funding since then has precluded until only recently proceeding forward with the construction that we're seeing today. It couldn't come any sooner. With Gerard Bautista, the airport terminal manager and facilities supervisor, I had the benefit of walking the main construction site on the facility yesterday. The scale, depth, and breadth of that project is impressive, and I strongly urge all committee members and senators to avail of a site visit to get a better appreciation of what's going on there and why it's so sorely needed. Yesterday afternoon, the facility was humming with arrivals and departures, essentially a little city with people all over the place who are working there or handling visitors coming and going. The airport is operating with major space constraints to handle the volume and flow of traffic. Now that the construction area is creeping up toward the gates and areas most of us are familiar with, there's going to be a fair amount of possible disruption and inconvenience to the public. Nonetheless, I'm confident that the management and staff will sync appropriately with the operators and contractors to minimize such. Once complete, I'm made to understand in about 18 months, the facility will be in an efficient operational state and ready to handle the present volumes. I think Senator Muñoz was indicating earlier that when she passed through there, she saw a number of the passengers sitting on the floor, and it's just indicative that the facility has outgrown its capacity and ability to serve everybody. With regards to finances, I haven't had the benefit yet of looking at the detailed audited financials. However, in gleaning the broad stroke data on the revenues and expenses, it appears that the airport management has a firm grasp on the revenue drivers and obligations to keep the airport up and running responsibly. They have managed the resources appropriately. Regarding personnel, the new executive manager has expressed his confidence in the existing professional management team to ramp up and help with improving performance, processes, and standards by weaning off longtime consultants. That's a good signal for the current personnel and management team and their successors. The investment of resources should be in the personnel who work there on a daily basis. One area of concern I may want to zero in on is the burn rate for legal services associated with matters not only involving procurement, but just general run-of-the-mill day-to-day review or analysis of standard agreements, contracts, personnel matters, claims, leases, and compliance with rules and regs. The airport should have more rigor in that area. Concerning the high-profile procurement dispute and cases attached to that dispute, I believe we should let the cases presently wending their way through the judicial system run their course. The judicial time standards which the judiciary has adhered to will render decisions, judgments, and opinions soon enough. An additional area which I would like to dedicate some focus on is addressing the Tithing Parkway and the major traffic there. All of us know how bad traffic is during peak hours in and around that airport. The land acquisition and redevelopment plans and projects should be prioritized to help alleviate that growing traffic. And this is going to become more and more of an issue as time goes on. Having chaired the transition team review for the Guam Visitors Bureau, I see the need for close and frequent collaboration between the airport and GVB, as well as the Guam Customs and Quarantine operation. There's a lot of moving parts in the respective operations of each and a need to align properly. After all, they serve visitors and residents alike. The transition reports noted the need to align these three as they impact upon one another. We need to have the government parts all working in the same direction and on the right pathway in tandem with the operators for the benefit of serving all residents and visitors. Continued and close collaboration and frequent collaboration between and among these stakeholders will be advanced as a standard practice under this new administration. From preliminary 2018 data, over 3.5 million people traveled in and out of that airport. That's not insignificant. As critical infrastructure to the island, I know how important it is for us to ensure we have an airport that operates efficiently. With your vote of confidence, I look forward to immersing more with the management and the board of directors to try and help contribute toward that end. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman and Senators.
Thank you, Mr. Tydinko. I'd like to now open it to the panel here for some questions. Is there anyone that would like to pose questions to nominee Senator Lee?
Sujusmasi, Madam Chair, and thank you very much, Mr. Tydinko, for accepting the governor's nomination. In your testimony, you mentioned your previous professional and personal relationship with Senator Atta, and I think we have that in common. I was able to work with him last term as a colleague. My question to you is, will your previous personal and professional relationship with the new GM make it difficult for you or make it challenging for you to provide strong board oversight?
Well, should I get the vote of confidence from the legislature? I'm just going to be one of 7 members there. Personally, I do have confidence in Tom Atta. As all of you know, he's got a lot of integrity, and he has a vicious work ethic. He's very meticulous, and it just makes things much easier when you have somebody who's laser focused in on the operations. I mean, it's not going to be any difficult for me to sit down with him if need be to say, or I could take it the other way from him. It's not just a unilateral feedback. It's going to be a bilateral feedback. If he says, Dan, I don't think that the board should go this particular way, or maybe we could tweak it accordingly, then I would accept that. So I think that there's enough of a working relationship to work towards the better end here.
Thank you. Also, just wanted to ask, and this is something that we generally ask, are any of your personal or business dealings with GTA in conflict with your role as a port board or as a airport board member?
No, I don't believe so. Previously, when I served on the Port Authority Board of Directors, whenever there was any discussion regarding GTA or Teleguam Holdings as far as the services, I made it clear at the outset that I would wall myself off and not have any comment, input, or take any action concerning any of the particular business for GTA.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Tydinko.
Senator Telo Taidegui.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity. And thank you, Mr. Tydinko, for stepping up to the plate and becoming, again, another public servant. I'm sure that you're going to do a great job. I have total confidence in your work and your ethics, too, as well. As I mentioned to my Uncle Don, we have a bill that's coming out, Bill 8, and this extends the opportunity for agencies for lease agreements on property. So I hope you look at that, and even though I know you're still part of getting involved with the airport, and you're such good friends with former Senator Tom Atta, that I hope someone's here to testify for that bill and get their opinion.
I briefly just looked at some of the real broad stroke issues concerning leasing down there. So similar to the Port Authority, the airport, of course, is limited insofar as any long-term leases there, 5 years, and then they would have to come down here to the legislature, of course, and get the final approval or consideration by the by the legislature for anything beyond that. One of the things that was brought up to me by the terminal facilities manager yesterday, Gerard, when we were driving on the runway grounds, there's one particular area that I think that, and it actually came under the Camacho administration, I was informed, that an air cargo facility, and they have the property set aside there for an air cargo facility to possibly flourish as a new industry with the amount of goods and products that come into this airport. As everybody knows, the Port Authority brings 95% of the goods. This may be able to offset and create new industry on island.
Okay, thank you. And I did notice that you did touch on GVB and working with them closely, with regards to, assistance. And I know it's hand in hand, but and I know how difficult the airport is in having funding. I've seen the numbers, and GVB has the opportunity to, give you guys some money. So I think you should continue to pursue that in a way of not just collaborating, but having them assist you as well.
No, I appreciate your earlier comment with regards to possible utilization of TAF, Tourist Attraction Fund monies that are accumulated under the TAF. That's about $45 million a year, half of which goes to the GVB's operations and marketing efforts. The other half is in the hands of the legislature. So for whatever operations the legislature appropriates the money for, and a good chunk of that money is presently appropriated for the Department of Parks and Recreation. There's over $22.5 million in the TAF that the legislature appropriates. So if there's something above and beyond for the Bureau's operational budget and marketing efforts that the legislature may want to consider, particularly since it's an associated and related operation between the airport and GVB, I don't think the airport or GVB or the industry is going to push back on that as well.
Okay. Are you familiar also with Routes Asia? Are you familiar with that?
I'm sorry?
Routes Asia. Are you familiar with that?
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that.
Okay. I believe some of the other members might know about it. Look into that. That is discussions that I know GVB has been in with this membership, and it has to do with airline operators, and it's something you need to look into. I remember going to a seminar with regards to that. It's very helpful, but I'm pretty sure people at the airport know about it, and I hope you get into that because it's very, very, again, helpful. Okay, thank you again so much for stepping up to the plate.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Tydinko, I'm looking forward to completing this nomination process and really want to move forward in filling all the seats for our Airport Authority Board. I just want to make sure that I thank you for your testimony and offering once again to serve our community. So thank you, Mr. Tydinko.
Appreciate it, Senator Moylan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We know that confirmation hearings, I'd like to make a statement. We know that confirmation hearings typically involve nominees receiving accolades and kudos about their fitness for the position to which they have been appointed. And while rather routine, it is nonetheless a process by which the legislature gathers information on whether to approve or reject candidates that are nominated or appointed by the governor. Having previously served as the executive director for the Guam Airport, I'm familiar with the great responsibility that each member of the board must bear when exercising all powers vested in the authority. However, I also understand that to be considered fit enough to govern the authority, this great responsibility must also be accompanied by equally great character. In this case, I refer to character in terms of the moral qualities distinctive to an individual. In 2012, while employed as the general manager of the Port Authority, the nominee before us served as the chairman of the Port's board of directors. So I had many occasions to interact with Mr. Tydinko in a professional capacity. Unfortunately, Madam Chair, these interactions forced me to emphatically oppose Mr. Tydinko's appointment. I further call into question his integrity and ability to justly serve on a board as critical to our island as that of GIAA's. Madam Chair, I have nothing to lose or gain by Mr. Tydinko's confirmation. I simply believe that to sit here in silence would not only neglect my duties as a member of this committee, but would act as a great disservice to our people, whom I believe deserve to be reminded of his conduct in his role as the Port's board chairman. And I can speak to specific actions which I believe led to many unresolved liabilities and credibility issues that plague the Port to this day. Mr. Tithing permitted unprofessional and irregular legal billing practices for the sake of his personal relationship with the port's legal counsel. Under his chair, the port's legal counsel was allowed to delay the submission of bills for legal services for many months at a time, sometimes more than 9 months after services were first rendered. If you think that with an average monthly billings of more than $60,000, this meant that more than $500,000 in legal fees were incurred before bills were even submitted for a review and approval. The outstanding fees that were already incurred but not billed were also not disclosed in management audit letters when I was there. This is significant because it becomes less likely for management to determine the accuracy of charges or manage the efficient expenditure of public funds when bills are submitted untimely. And despite being informed on more than one occasion about this irregularity, Mr. Tithing repeatedly allowed it to happen anyways and did little to require legal counsel to be timely with bill submissions. Indeed, Mr. Tithing appeared complicit when on one occasion he directed the immediate payment of invoices to cover legal counsel's payroll and MC obligations. This mandate provided little opportunity for appropriate review and scrutiny of the legal bills. From what I observed, many of these bills did not fairly reflect the basis on which the attorney's charges had been determined. One example is an invoice, number 11618, that billed more than 24 hours in a single day for one attorney. By the time I exposed it, and I wasn't employed at the time, forcing the port's legal counsel to correct the invoice, the bill had already been certified and paid in full by the port. Mr. Tithing's failure to address and carefully manage the port's legal fees speaks volumes about his unsuitability to be a board member of GIAA. And we are well aware that the airport has its share of challenges today. While this negligence is enough reason for concern, it has also been documented that while at the port, Mr. Tithing blatantly disregarded Guam law by conducting board meetings in private in clear violation of Guam's open government law. For example, and it was referenced several times today, in an email transmission dated October 18, 2012 to other board members, Mr. Tithing called for a meeting at legal counsel's office indicating, and I quote, "a need for us to meet tomorrow," unquote. In response, one board member inquired, quote, "do we need a priest, referee, fireman, videographer?" Mr. Tithing replied, "how about a gravedigger?" Long before any report or investigation had been completed about a work injury claim, this email so succinctly captures the flippancy and cruelty in Mr. Tithing's desire to bury political foes and other longtime members of the port's family. You have heard today, and you have seen some sitting in the audience, and I cannot begin to express the ruin of the lives that resulted from Mr. Tithing's chairmanship. All the while, he would have everyone believe that he did Guam a favor, that he cleaned house, and uncovered a criminal conspiracy to defraud the government by the Port 7. Just step back for a moment and think about this supposed grandiose scheme he uncovered. He would have you believe that 7 unrelated employees, many who were recently recognized for their outstanding service to the port, would risk their livelihoods and unblemished careers to permit one employee to have spine surgery for an incident that no one disputes occurred, with the majority of funds earmarked to pay for a surgeon and off-island hospital expenses. What would these employees gain by engaging in this grand conspiracy? How absurd a plot, even for a cheap detective novel. The fact that Mr. Tithing bought into the conspiracy, or perhaps promised someone he would develop a conspiracy, and decided before the investigation even commenced that a grave digger was necessary demonstrates a complete lack of open-mindedness and transparency needed to serve as a GIAA board member. Madam Chair, I do not condone the immoral actions Mr. Tithing has subjected myself and others at the port who were unfortunate enough to find themselves under his corrupted power. He may be wonderful to those he considers his peers or his equals, but to those outside his circle of desirables or political alliances, he can be arrogant, callous, and dismissive. It's as plain as black and white. The meeting minutes of December 19, 2012, wherein my termination was discussed, was interspersed with, quote, "Wait a minute, Merry Christmas," seconded with "Merry Christmas!" exclamation point, and further spiced with 5 separate notations of, in brackets, laughing. How festive. Better yet, please read the board minutes of October 12, 2012, executive session, for a more vivid discourse of his abusive character. I want to end on this point, Madam Chair. If upstanding moral character, integrity, and transparency are virtues that our governor prioritizes for her administration to exemplify, then Mr. Tithing is the wrong man for this critical agency board, especially if he is pegged to be its chair. His confirmation as a member to the airport's board would be a great disservice to the people of Guam. As a member of this committee, I firmly stand against this appointment. I urge my fellow colleagues, and I encourage you, read into the details and do the same. Sa paraham judos ni gaibhau pagu, fanongi na timamay si juus. Sa magahiren no. So I want to thank you for allowing me to make these statements. I do not necessarily have any questions for the nominee, but I believe that everything that I have stated is on the record, and I would be very happy to share that with you, Madam Chair, and the committee. Siduos Maasi.
Thank you very much, Senator Torres. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out here today to give testimony on Mr. Tithing, Mr. Weekly, and Mr. Tithing. This now concludes our confirmation hearing agenda. It is now 4:31 p.m. We are adjourned. Thank you.